If you clicked on this video, you obviously know who Bad Bunny is, so I'm not gonna talk in depth about his career. But basically, in 7 years, he went from working in a random grocery store to being considered the biggest musician nowadays. I thought about making this video because of Bad Bunny's biggest controversy right now. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal. I feel like most people are overreacting in this situation, but it made me remember about the other times where most people were against Bad Bunny. And I thought it would be interesting because I feel like most people don't remember or don't know about that time. Like, I feel like most of the people who follow him now think that he was always like loved by everyone, especially if you're someone that doesn't speak Spanish at all and you follow him because you like how the music sounds. But back in 2016, before he blew up and got to the point where he is right now, most of the people hated him and made fun of him. And before I talk about it, let me put it into context first. Reggaeton is a style of music that started in the 80s. And the story is interesting. I'm not gonna go in depth about it because this video is gonna be long. But basically, it started in poor neighborhoods and poor communities. And it's music that you will want to listen to if you want to party and, like, you know, relax, whatever. The songs usually talk about sex, drinking, taking drugs, and, you know, just doing stuff like that. So back in the 80s and 90s, people hated this music because of how explicit it was. And just keep it in mind, but I'm talking about Latin America, not the US. Because in Latin America, it's a little bit more conservative because we have a lot of like family values. Like, they're way more important than in the US. So the older generations didn't want kids to be listening to this type of music. And to this day, it's still, you know, not accepted by a lot of people. But anyways, in the early 2000s, reggaeton started being more and more normalized. People like the rhythm and the lyrics, but there was still people who thought that it was too sexual. So it was growing, but there was still like a stigma around it. On the other hand, Latin trap is a genre that started in the early 2000s. The songs usually talk about the same thing, but it's less sexual and more like aggressive. You know, like men talking about making money, committing crimes, being tough, and just that type of stuff. So when it started, people also disapproved this type of music, but just like reggaeton, after a lot of years, it started becoming more and more accepted. So young people were also listening to this music, but again, there was stigma around it. So going back to Bad Bunny, when he first started making music in 2016 and then 2017, he only made songs in those two genres, especially Latin trap. So that stigma went to him. I don't know how people felt about him when he was only known in Puerto Rico, but when people from other countries started finding out who he was and the type of music that he made, nobody wanted to play it out loud because you didn't want to be associated with the people who listen to that type of music. It's basically the same way that people look at 6ix9ine, Lil Pump. You know, like, you don't want to be associated with that. You don't want to be part of that audience. But anyways, I feel like that's enough context. So I'm gonna move on to the way that people actually treated him. The first thing I'm gonna talk about is the way he looked. Back in 2017, once he had an audience outside of Puerto Rico, he went from dressing like every other guy in the industry to putting himself like out there, you know, like being more colorful, wearing stuff that wasn't commonly seen, which people were in the fence about. Like, there was a lot of mixed reactions to it. But then he started doing more than just his clothes. He started putting shapes in his hair. And this decision was the one that most people didn't like. And when I was looking for images for this video, I realized that he did look rough back in the day. I don't know, I feel like it's because he didn't have any facial hair, but I don't know, bitch. Like, he definitely had a glow up. But anyways, as soon as people started seeing this new hairstyle, everyone agreed that it looked like Conchas, which is basically a type of brand in Mexico. You're missing out if you don't know about it. Just Google it. But basically, for like a whole year, I think, people were making memes about his hair. And on top of that, he also started doing his nails, which, you know, nowadays is normalized. But before the pandemic, and as a Latino, people didn't fuck with it. It wasn't until he made a post in Instagram where he talked about how he was in Spain and he went to a salon to get a manicure, and the place said no because he was a guy. I translated the post so that you can read it yourself, but basically this post started changing people's mind because edgy kids were happy about the situation and they started taking it too far. Like, they started being openly homophobic. So because of that reason, women started following him because he was a man who wasn't insecure about it. Like, most men made fun of him in his comments because he did his nails, but he kept doing it. Like, he didn't change, he didn't stop because people were making fun of him. So this started happening in 2018. You know, at this point, I was also started to like him because when I was 16 and 17, I was also one of them who like made fun of him. Like, I followed him because I was hate watching everything he did. But then I, you know, grew up, I matured. But basically in 2018, that's when most people started to change their mind about him. So moving on to the actual music aspect of his career. As I said before, people had this idea of what reggaeton and Latin trap was supposed to be. So when Bad Bunny started, we took 1 or 2 songs where he was flexing and repeating the same phrase over and over again and say that all of his music was like that. Like most of the people who hated him just assumed that that's all he did. Like he repeated the same phrase over and over again. And if he wasn't doing that, then he was just being overly sexual. So back in 2016 and 2017, whenever someone talked about Bad Bunny's lyrics, people had 2 opinions. They're plain, like anyone can come up with those lyrics, and whoever listens to them is just dumb. You know, like they don't like to think, they're just superficial. Or his lyrics promote substance abuse and violence, so he's like straight up damaging society. And bitch, I remember back in the day, it was normal to tell someone, you look like you like Bad Bunny, you know, as an insult. And it wasn't something that only a small section of the internet did. Like it was basically everyone. When I was looking for what videos I was gonna put on the screen, I went to YouTube and I saw videos from years ago that have millions of views where they're just talking shit about Bad Bunny. And nobody felt bad for him because we thought that he was a misogynist because he talks about treating women as objects. He encourages kids to use drugs and to party instead of being in school. And looking back at it, we didn't actually care. Like I was 16, I was 17. Like I didn't actually care what kids were consuming, you know. I was also edgy and I thought that men had it harder than women. You know, like, I was one of those guys. I would say that, oh, he treats women like shit, so we shouldn't feel bad for him. But it was basically a way for us to not feel bad about being mean to him, you know. But anyways, there was 2 times where Bad Bunny actually responded to this criticism. The first time was when a teacher from Puerto Rico made a post. It's long, so I'm not gonna translate it, but basically she's talking about how she's trying so hard to educate and people like Bad Bunny are taking that away. So this post goes viral, and a couple of days later, Bad Bunny posted on Twitter a letter titled, "I'm not the Minister of Education," which again is long, so I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I'm gonna try to translate it, but it is long, so I don't know. But basically he talks about how it's not his fault. He became a scapegoat for a lot of people. And if you're a teacher and your students don't care about what you have to say, that's on you. You're not making class interesting, so you're not stimulating their mind, so that's not on him. And then the second time that he received backlash was in 2020 when he was named Songwriter of the Year. At this point, the opinion that people had about Bad Bunny changed. Most people liked him, but there was still like a small section of the internet that it still felt the same way. So when he was named Songwriter of the Year, people started saying that he didn't deserve it. This generation is going to shit. And this time, Benito didn't respond with just a letter. He made a whole song about it. Obviously, I can't play it, but basically he talks about political issues. You know, he talks about Black Lives Matter, immigration, voting, women's rights, and basically saying that there's real problems that people should be focused on instead of him getting an award. The name of the song is Compositor del Año, and it's a good song for real. Like, I recommend for you to listen to it after this video. Okay, moving on to the last thing that people criticize him about. The first thing you notice when you listen to Bad Bunny is how low his voice is, you know, like how deep it is. He sounds really different from any other artist that does reggaeton or Latin trap, and people love him for him now. But when he first started, everyone thought that it was so goofy, like nobody liked it. There was memes, YouTube videos, articles talking about how he doesn't sound good, and it's surprising that people still listen to him.
Bad Bunny lo peta, un tío que canta bostezando.
Claro.
So what ended up happening was that people assumed that if you did Latin trap was because you didn't have any talent, like they weren't able to make it in any other genre, so they had to do Latin trap. And this belief got worse because Bad Bunny posted a story where he was in the studio and he was just singing.
Yo me compro un 4-7, yo me compro un 4-7.
So when he posted that video, people were saying like, you don't need talent to blow up, you just need auto-tune. And personally, when I was 16 and I saw that video, that's the reason that made me not like Bad Bunny, you know, because like to me, like he didn't sound good.
Bunny's gonna go up to the top rope. I said it before. Again, Bunny's fly.
That's all I remember. Basically in 2016 and 2017, that's like where he was the most hated. And I think it's cool that he didn't change or try to appeal to people. You know, like he just kept doing himself and he blew up. Personally, that's the reason I like him, because I saw how much shit he was getting when he first started and he kept going. You know, I could never. And yeah, I think that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked them. If you want to support me, just click on the description, you know, like I don't know, but you're a grown adult, like you know what to do.